Good evening, everyone. Professor York here again. This is part 2 of Let's Talk Tactics. Part 1, we talked about several different tactical options with an emphasis on social media on the back end. But tactics are really nothing without being integrated as a part of integrated market communication. That's something that we will open up with. We'll then talk about how it ties in with the funnel. We're going to talk about, which is really critical, is metrics. So those are some topics that will be covered in this section, and to just really emphasize that without strategy, tactics are really, you might as well just be burning money. And from a real world standpoint, this is one of the biggest concerns that come from clients in terms of what channels, where do I invest, how do I get the best return of investment? Because they have too many options, too few dollars, and you really have to have a sense of really good strategy before you know where to make the best investments. So let's talk about marketing communications. And marketing communications is really a mix of advertising, social media, and public relations. So we talked about free and paid, and that's what these three pieces involve. Ads are very much push, and they push the message out. There's a lot of control. PR is free media, and unlike advertising, which is paid for, and it brings a lot of credibility when you have a news story. Social media brings out the community in terms of crowd engagement. These pieces we talked about in previous lecture. And when we think about integrated market communications, it's really this integration, coordination of the main communication channels of a company. And I don't want that to be confused with distribution channels, because I see this happen a lot. So there are communication channels, but the purpose at the end of the day is whatever channel you choose, okay, based on tactic, is to deliver a clear, consistent, and compelling message about the organization and its products. So a strategic marketer utilizing integrated marketing communications is going to map that buying process, okay? And that's, AIDA, etc. Here we have unaware, awareness, linker, but it's the same thing in terms of the funnel. And what we want to make sure is that there's consistency in terms of brand, platform, and media. To take a look at this in a little more detail, what we do see is that we have that at the center point is that clear and consistent, compelling company and brand messaging. And what we do have is now integrated a mix of tactical options. So advertising can reach the masses, geographically dispersed, at low cost per exposure, and allows that seller to repeat the message many times. So cost per hit is really low, especially when going on a large scale type of campaign on a national basis. So big national brands tend to do that. They re-emphasize their trademark and their brand image. Personal selling is the most effective message. It is closing for coffee, okay? It is, and for the buyer's process. And what it does is the good salesperson helps to refine. As you bring AIDA, you are, as a good salesperson, refining that buyer's preferences, actions, and closing it in terms of decision. and also maintaining the customer relationship in the keep side. PR is on the earned media side, and it's a very much more believable form of promotion. News stories, interviews on TV, radio channels, just bring some authenticity and much more believability, which is very important, credibility. And then you have direct and digital marketing, which is immediate, customized, interactive. And this is a variety of tactics from direct mail, catalogs, telephone, marketing, online, mobile, and social media. And then sales promotion. This is interesting because I know that one of our class teams talked about having sampling, which is a tactic. So sales promotion includes the coupons, the deals, the premiums, and also sampling that happens. And that attracts customer attention and strong incentives to purchase. Now, as I lay this out, I want to bring back a strategic framework. And I think I pulled this slide from my Genentech brand plan, which was the path to value, as you can see the rocks moving across, which crossed across many of our slides in this presentation. But I think the key point to take away is that you need to move both to the channel for a push and to the end user, the patient in this case, for the pull. As we can see in the pull actions, we have a variety of different levers: field sales, medical marketing, reimbursement support, etc., that support the strategy for pull, and they're tactical levers to be able to get the job done. And as I talked about in the last class lecture, that conferences and meeting, which are trade shows, and sales, medical marketing, which is something new, but it's equivalent to sales, are there for that purpose of pull. All right, so why do we do this? Well, what we do, as you've remembered, is the customer journey. In many ways, this journey patterns the funnel. So this part of the funnel is what we're looking at. But also, as we have to think about with repeat buyers, to make sure that we're keeping them as well, and ultimately growing them, creating viral loops. And if you're effective doing this, then you are going to start measuring. In fact, I have a colleague down in San Diego looking for someone to be able to help him with doing funnel metrics. This is just an exposition of utilizing sales and marketing materials that fit in the funnel as well, to be able to drive. But I think the key point that we have here is at every step we have to have some basis of measurement. And really that is the hallmark of good marketing. It's strategy, execution, and control. And control is not control of spend, but it's a measurement to know, am I doing the right thing? Am I getting the biggest impact to the business? What do I need to tweak? So there's a great book that I've been reading called Hacking Growth. And this is where they're running various experiments on the web, and they're adjusting accordingly based on data they're getting. And what they're doing is they're based on response and data. They're taking in various metrics across the funnel to see whether their ad copy, etc., might be at the end of the day working or not, and doing it anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks, depending on what the field time space is. And so the space of time that you're examining the experiment is working or not. So let me give you an example in terms of how social media tactics can work and how it integrates strategically. So we have different pieces tactically, and realistically you need to think through how it affects the funnel. So I have the AIDA that's here because I think it's the most simplest. And this comes directly from a brand plan that we worked on for the company down in Santiago, Chile. And first and foremost is the point of awareness. And you could see between the website, basically Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, this is what we saw, which bring awareness to the value proposition or to the vision screening app. But what we do support, once we bring awareness, you have to support, because you have to move that customer through this process efficiently. And this is one of the goals, is to make sure the website is, especially from interest to action, as well as other support tools that will allow the customer to be able to make a reasoned decision across alternatives, so that action, whether it's I'm going to be a part of your community, to the point that I'm going to download your app. Here's another way of looking at it. So we have the website here. We've diagrammed out in terms of center point. And what we're trying to do with our social campaign is to drive direct links into the website and ultimately a call to action. We then look at indirect interactions between different social media pieces to drive traffic from one piece to another piece or directly to the website. So the goal of social at the end of the day is to drive traffic to the website, which will ultimately drive to a call to action, okay, which ties into the funnel. Now, many times as a marketer, what you are going to do is you're going to have to create what we call these things called tactical templates. So take all the fancy graphics away and you're back to Excel spreadsheets, and you end up having tactic, timing, cost, and oh, by the way, how we're measuring it. This comes from our brand plan for Kidsila. But what are we doing with key levers, field sales, materials, programs? And this is the focus on what we're doing a poll with our sales force. The timing. So when you talk about implementation plans, I think about tactic, I think about timing. I'll get down to what quarter. And if you have a company that's running latest estimates on a quarterly basis, it may be even down to the month level. You then think about the cost that's there. There's a cost for your field sales that incents them. Money drives the salespeople. Okay, you need to budget for that. You have to budget for the materials and the programs to support them. But at the end of the day, you have to have certain metrics to know whether it's working or not. And it could be soft metrics and hard metrics. For instance, hospital formularies might be a push metric. Hitting sales targets might be a softer. Hitting quota is a very, very hard one. Okay, so this just gives you a sense. And this, we do roll-ups in terms of for each tactical category, so we know our spend. And as you can see, you roll that up into a master budget. And in this case, you can see that's about $41 million for push and pull. but we have to offer that there's a return. I think this was a few $100 million. I want to say about 250 that we were promising back in terms of return to the company. So one of the key things that you have to think about with tactics is what we call metrics. Okay, people call it ROI. There are different metrics beyond ROI. ROI is rudimentary. It's Tactics 101. Let's take a little bit more detailed look in terms of these analytics, in terms of market performance. First and foremost, you need to understand from the management perspective that many thought leaders point out that tactics get measured. Peter Drucker, what gets measured gets managed, and Tom Peters, In Search of Excellence, what gets measured gets done. So one way to look at things is you set up the experiment or the program. You set with that experiment or program key performance indicators, KPIs, and you will hear this for the rest of your career. You will run the experiment and you will measure the KPIs. Maybe 2 weeks, 6 weeks, maybe 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. And what you're going to do, and the reason why you measure, as you can see the circle, is you're evaluating. Do I stay the course or not? Or if I run an A/B test and I say, well, A is better than B, you move on with the new campaign if B is better than A. Some basics relative to metrics. I think it's important that we have that foundation. First and foremost is you got to look at sales. That's the bottom line. Look at periodic revenue, weekly, monthly, year to date. Growth rate, year to year. You can even look at CAGR. You look at sub-segment and segment size and growth, which is very important if you're targeting into a particular audience. And then new versus recurring. So you see that TRX, NRX, RRX, but that's in prescriptions, but we look at the total prescriptions, which would be the total units being sold, what's new and what's recurring, because new is new customers entering the funnel and coming into a relationship. Recurring is basically existing customers who are coming back. So both of them are very important to the total. The second area is market share, which many marketers think about. And that's this share. If you're especially in a red, we call it red ocean, tight markets, not growing much, so it's about stealing share. You need to understand market share, and that's what you hear typically among many marketers. But we also want to see that growth rate as well in terms of share. And then we get pricing. This is something I dealt with at a product manager level, which is called ASP, or average sales price. And when you're playing the market share game, you're throwing discounts. And I'll throw the trade a nice discount. Well, or I give certain discounts as incentives. Well, that discount affects, if you remember from the purchase driver scorecard, it affects your top line revenue as well as your bottom line income. Okay? So if you're playing ASP decline because of discounts, so if we look at the case with Cleopatra and going to trade, you have to look at the impact on ASP. So price is a very key lever. So that's what you have to really keep in mind in terms of how can you maintain the value, the brand, the pull. So on the flip side, that you don't have the trade constantly pushing you and pressing you for discounts. And it's very common as more commoditized your space is and your product grouping is, and more alternatives a customer has. Last but not least is ROI. And it's a dollar's return on the project investment. But you probably heard me use a few other terms, such as internal rate of return or net present value, which is really looking at the return of free cash flows over the next few years that have been discounted back to offset the initial investment. And then payback period, which is just another metric relative from a financial standpoint from your investment to how long it would take to get a payback. Other metrics that matter are impressions, which are the opportunity to review content, reach, which are the individual users or social accounts reached by the content, e.g. the Nielsen rating for TV. Engagement is, what did the user do? What actions? Did they click, like, comment? And then we get a little more granular. The cost per metric, okay? Cost per 1,000. CPA is a cost per acquisition or sign up. And then sentiment. Is it positive? So not just is cost per how many, but now is it positive, negative, neutral? And it could be qual. And this just sort of lays out in terms of how these metrics can tie into digital, print, or just on a broad basis. Very, very useful layout here of some key metrics, particularly in the digital space. Other things that you need to think about is your key digital metrics. Who are your unique visitors? And that's how many are coming in and how many are you actually unique. Not repeat, but unique individuals, not from the same organization or from, we're looking at unique. And we look at a day, week, and monthly basis. Another one is click-throughs. All right, and what we're looking at is clicks on a CTA, or call to action. The click rate is the clicks on the content, or impressions, divided by impressions by 1,000. And just put it as a reference point, 20% is considered a decent baseline. And then you have the click-through rate, which is clicks to brand to clicks to your contact by times 100. And 10% is pretty highly desirable. And then link tagging, which is links with analytics tracking built to your URL. So, you think about that. Bitly, Google have those type of things in their metrics. So that's something to think about as well. So we look at these. Let's talk about the funnel. So you'll hear a term called CTCA, or cost to activate a customer, acquire a customer. That's all the costs for all you do to be able to get at least one customer. Okay? And you're looking at total cost paid to drive customers into the funnel divided by converted customers. Which is good because we need to know if our spend is actually converting. Is it very big? So the higher the number, the worse the number it is. Okay? Then we have what we call funnel efficiency, which is the opposite, which is the rate of which you can convert more customers from funnel entries. So the lower the number, the better. on 1 to 10, 10 to 1. Okay, that rate is desirable. And we've talked about this in the purchase driver scorecard. And then we need to think about, is it cost efficient in driving these through the funnel as well? And then the third major funnel metric you have to think about is the lifetime value. So it's not that one purchase, but the multiple purchases that a customer does. So let's take another look at LTV. These are two equations. So you could see the first one, version 1, margin divided by 1 minus the retention rate plus the interest rate, and then subtraction of the acquisition cost. Version 2, average monthly revenue per customer times gross margin per customer divided by monthly churn rate. And churn being basically the number of customers who have entered, who have fallen out. So there's a rate of fallout that can occur. So you're trying to get a sense of, what you're keeping versus what in terms of longer term, in terms of the individual customer versus what we're losing in terms of churn. So here's some example metrics from a campaign. Okay, as you can see, these are things we talked about: impressions, clicks, click rate, click through. Okay, average time spent. So we can, especially with Google metrics, there are ways that we can look at time spent, total time spent, shares, okay, which can be picked up on some other social platforms like Twitter. Video views like in YouTube. Okay, total, and then ultimately your budget and your spend. And then you use that to be able to put a relative cost per a particular metric. So the metrics on top being basically the denominator, and this being the numerator. And usually the data is summarized in a dashboard. Okay, so as you can see, a dashboard of, number of followers, change in those followers, what are we netting in a Facebook campaign, impressions, how many events from our videos, and number of video views. So you can see a lot of data can be summarized in a dashboard. Here's another with basically a link service called Bitly, which I really like and I encourage, because Bitly you can measure if you're doing like hyperlinks for downloading a particular report or something like that. It's a really great tool to give a dashboard. And then we get to loyalty. One loyalty index is called the Dow index, and naturally top box scores rule. Okay, and we're talking about completely satisfied, definitely, willing to repurchase and willing to recommend. Okay, so these are, from the lower end of the funnel. Once we've gotten AIDA in terms of the purchase, but then we get to, how satisfied, and then so we're looking at this loyalty and repurchasing thing. And you can be able to look at these metrics to see if you're satisfying in the keep side. And as you can see, this also gives us a sense of share of impact on wallet. Another key thing that we look from a metric is called NPS, or Net Promoter Score. And what we're looking at is a number of individuals who, we look at percentage of promoters that are here, that rate 9 and 10 versus the percentage of detractors who rate from 0 to 6. So it's a 10-point scale, and then you have breakdown detractors, passives, and promoters. And what we're looking to see is positive, that our promoters, which reflect virality, are going to be, that percentage is going to be higher than those who are not as happy with the service and are willing to detract from it. So I'm going to walk you through a stepwise process of doing some metrics. This comes from a presentation by Lindsay Lachelle, who's a colleague down in San Diego. She did this presentation. It's San Diego Startup Week in the marketing track. And what I loved about her presentation is she talked about metrics. So, I think the first step in the process when you start building metrics is you need to identify, so take note here, identify essential business outcomes, both direct, which we think about in terms of sales, but indirect, which can be these different metrics that we see here. Awareness, donations, engagement, leads. So here's 3 examples. We have, as Lindsay had described, we have a white label app developer, okay, a dermatologist, and then you have a company doing a healthy snack brand. Okay, and they're essential, what we call business outcomes. For the app developer, like MD Eye Care, hey, sell the app, get action. For a dermatologist, it's about seeing patients, filling seats. And for the snack brand, it's moving units, selling those snacks. Part 2 is aligning your digital marketing efforts. And it's not digital, but it could be all your marketing. But considering that so many efforts are made digitally, we need to think about that. So, think about each step. So the buyer's journey is very critical, as we've talked about. The funnel, AIDA or ACA. Here are some examples with the healthy snack brand and the white label app developer. And as you can see, audience journey in each of this under ACA, which is just an abbreviation version of AIDA, where the action is where, for instance, in this case, we'll buy the service, contact product details for consideration. So what are they doing in that point of the journey where they're considering different consideration sets of different products? Awareness, which is the front end of the funnel, finding resources, sharing content, accessing that information. Okay, and the same thing if we look at with the white label app is awareness, being findable, consideration, where we're now gathering information. That's why your information that is going to be customer friendly and in their language is so critical, because that's where they're sorting at you from other sources. And ultimately the call to action in terms of contract sales, they're there. Part 3, identify your success metrics. These numbers will reflect the amount of success we are achieving. Again, get back to the funnel. Action, consideration, awareness. And remember to be careful and to add content. So we look at the 2 examples that Lindsay shared. Healthy snack brand, white label app developer. And what you can see is the steps in the journey, the support from a digital standpoint tactically, and the metrics. So you do something tactically, you need to measure. Okay? And you've tied it to a strategic out piece in the funnel. So funnel, tactic, measurement. You need to know. And the only other thing I would add is a period of time. So if your action is, product finder searches down to social media engagement metrics, new versus returning, sort of covers at different points of the journey. The same thing happens we're doing with the white label app developer. So Lindsay puts forth, what are your next steps once you've done this? Well, once you've got your data, you have to be able to create your strategic reporting matrix. And I guess the best way of doing it is like, how do you build your dashboard? And a good example of that was the last lecture when I talked to you about, here's the data. We have know whether we go in market or not, or we have good market segments to attack over in the Cleopatra case. Got that piece, but then we have criteria. So that what we can do is we can make some decisions, but we have to develop those metrics. We have to configure the data collection tools, whether it be like Google or another tool, or if it's off your website. You then build those reporting templates. So we want to make this automated. So that's why I say identify what you want to measure, collect, build the collection tools, have the templates for that, establish a benchmark, which is very critical. Because you need to know what is your baseline and what's your benchmark to know whether you've achieved success or not. And this is very critical. A lot of people don't think about that. And then measure, analyze, and hypothesis. So this is hacking. This is where you go through, you gather your data, you do this. In hacking growth, you may see experiments as short as 2 weeks, as long as 6, maybe even longer, maybe 6 months. Here's an example, a little more detailed. Don't expect you to read everything here. But this came from a brand plan we did for actually the company that we were consulting with down over in Santiago. So you could see we have our tactic from the website, SEO, online advertising. Our budget, but look at this, tracking and analysis. What is our primary success that is there? Maybe a secondary success. Okay? And so those are some things that you have to think about when you are developing tactical programs. You just don't throw stuff up against the wall. We have to think about strategy. And then the strategy has a tactic and a budget. And then ultimately you have to have a tracking to determine with metrics what works and doesn't, and then also we have a time frame. So it sort of ties with some of the SMART principles I chatted with you about a few weeks ago. So when we put these pieces together, what you see is in the brand plan, you have a current situation, and you have strategy, you forecast, but you have tactics. And this is what we've been talking about in the last 2 lectures. And those tactics are part of a tactical plan that have to feed back to the strategy and the forecast. But with the tactical plans, you need to have metrics. Those metrics are very critical because that data has to be fed back into your forecast and cuts to your current situation. Because that feedback will allow you to build the next brand plan. Or in hacking mode, every few weeks, you're changing the experiment. So hopefully what you've been able to do out of this discussion is get a little bit more strategic perspective relative to tactics. And in the end, I quote Tom Hopkins, who's one of the greatest sales trainers in the world, plan the work and work the plan. But also, per Tom Peters, make sure you monitor it. Good evening, everyone. I certainly hope you took some pearls from this lecture. This will be very helpful as you develop marketing activities and plans and go-to-market programs. Any program that does not have metrics at the end of the day is not going to be successful, because you will not know whether you've hit goal or not. So anyway, with that said, I look forward to our further discussions this quarter as we discuss how tactics tie into strategy. How do we budget for tactics? How do we look in terms of what are the right tactics? What are the right media channels? And at the end of the day, is how do we measure the impact? The next continuation on this series, which will be later on this quarter, we'll be talking about a marketing campaign and how we do tie in these elements in the 6M model. Okay, have a great evening. Thanks for your attention, and I'll see you next week.